So one of the most common questions that I get in my videos is, how do I prepare my starter before I use it? Most people that watch my videos know I only bake once a week towards the end of the week, and I leave the scrapings in the jar. And I'll show you how I grow this 10 grams of starter into a kilo if that's 10 loaves, or 2 kilos if it's 20 loaves, because I use 100 grams of starter per loaf. And I'll show you how I do that. So to start growing this from the 5 or 10 grams that I have in here, I will start off small. So I'll put 30 grams of water, mix it in with the starter that's in there, just the scrapings, just to get it in the water. It will make it grow faster. Then I will put 30 grams of flour. This is only scraping, so we're going to dilute this by literally 5-fold. So any acidity is going to just get removed, or have like a minimum amount of acidity. And that's it. That's the first feed in the jar. I'll let that grow a few hours, and then I'll feed it again, and I'll come back. So this took 6 or 7 hours. Because it's the first feed, it will take the longest because it's the scrapings of the jar, and the ratio is like 1 to 6 to 6. So I would do this the night before you're going to bake, or the afternoon, or early in the morning. I'll put timings of the timings that I use when I bake at the end of the video. But we've got 65 grams of starter in this jar now, and I'm now going to add 65 mils of water. And because this is a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio now, this should only take a few hours. And I'll mix that in. And now I'll add 65 grams of flour. So now we have equal parts flour, water, and starter in here. And like I said, now this is a 1-to-1 ratio. And this should grow a lot faster than the first feed that was only the scrapings. But the first feed's needed to get rid of all the acidity in that starter, so that we can start from a good point. Okay, that's 65. We'll stir that in. So we've started with 5 grams, and after this has grown, we will be on 195. So that's it now. We've got 195 grams of starter. We're going to let that grow about 4 hours at 26 degrees. And I'll show you what I do next. Now, if I was short on time, I could just make this my final feed and fed this, say, 850 grams of flour and 850 grams of water. And in my experience, adding one more feed before the final feed results in a much more active starter. So it's been 4 hours and it's very active. This is why I like to do this one feed in the middle. Now, that's 200 grams of starter. I'm going to change tubs and put it in my big one, because it's going to be 1800 grams of starter. So let me just put this in here. And the scrapings that are just in the jar now, so there's nothing in there. I'll put that in the fridge until next week. So that's done. Now I've got this weighed up already. I've got 800 grams of flour and my water at 800 grams. Now I will put, this is already measured up, so I'll just throw my water in, like so. And I'll break down the starter. And I'll stick in half the flour for now. And then the final flour, like so. And I'll mix that in. So once that's all mixed together, you don't want to over mix it, obviously. This is a ratio 1 to 4 to 4. So 1 part starter, 4 parts flour, 4 parts water. This should take about 8 hours to rise. maybe 6 depending on the temperature, and then I will use it in my mix. So there we go. So this starter took 8 hours to grow and start sinking at a ratio of 1:4:4. What I love about this method is that it wastes no flour between feeds. However, you'll need a mature starter for it to work well. If your starter slows down, as mine sometimes does, try feeding it a daily feed of 1 to 10 to 10 for about a week without using the fridge to give it a boost. If I needed more starter, for example, I needed to make 30 loaves instead of 18, I would adjust the final feed. Instead of 200 grams of starter and 800 grams of flour and 800 grams of water at a ratio of 1:5:5, I'd use 200 grams of starter, 1400 grams of flour and 1400 grams of water, and that would be a ratio of 1:7:7. But this may take a few more hours to peak compared to 1:5:5. For any feed over a ratio of 1:5:5, I aim to do it overnight. So I'll put on the screen my schedule for when I do mixes on a Thursday and bake on a Friday. So step 1, on Wednesday at midday, I will remove the starter from the fridge and feed it a ratio 1:6:6. 5 grams starter, maybe a little bit more. It could be sometimes 10. 30 grams of flour and 30 grams of water. This takes about 6 or 7 hours to peak, which for me is between 6 or 7 p.m. In winter, it may take a bit longer, and in summer, it could be faster. So step 2, Wednesday between 6 or 7 p.m., my starter will be ready. It will be peaked. This takes about 4 to 5 hours at a ratio 1:1:1. I will then take that starter of 65 grams and feed it 65 grams of flour and 65 grams of water. So step 3, on Wednesday about 11 p.m. to midnight, my starter will be ready for the final feed. So it will be ready overnight for the morning for when I want to use it. And this will be using 200 grams of the starter, 800 grams flour and 800 grams of the water. You could also change those numbers, 800 flour and 800 water, to fit how many loaves you want to make. And that's it. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment and I'll respond when I can. And thank you for watching the video.